Baltimore and on the internet at some point on Wednesday afternoon, obviously being swept by the Minnesota Twins. Now onward and upward to Houston, Texas, where I once admired a certain Columbia Blue football team that this man covered for many, many years in the National Football League. He is the longtime NFL chronicler for all things at the Houston Chronicle, now 38 years running. But I know him well enough, and we've had a few margaritas and a few nachos and some fun down there in Houston over the years. I know how much he loves the grand old game of baseball. And John McClain, if you were not the general of all things NFL and NFL media, you would be a super baseball fan now, wouldn't you?
Oh, I'm still a super baseball fan and have been since I can remember. First thing I remember, Nestor, when I was 6 was the 1960 World Series, and they used to play 2 All-Star games a year, and watching Willie Mays hit triples and steal bases, I was fascinated. And then the Yankees were the only game on every Saturday in Texas. It was the Yankees versus whoever, with Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reeves, and I would go over to my grandmother's house while my grandfather worked and watch the Yankees play every Saturday with her. Then I'd go out in the yard with my friends, and we'd pretend like we were the players, and we would play in the backyard, and everybody wanted to be Mickey Mantle, but I chose Roger Maris. Don't really know why, because everybody wanted to be the Mick, and so I love baseball. I've been a fan ever since. I love Brooks Robinson. I remember having Jackie Brandt's baseball card, as I had many, and when the Yankees would play the Orioles, I really liked the Orioles. And because my wife and I have a place on the Chesapeake Bay, eventually I'll be retired and we'll spend a lot of time up there. And our place is 35 minutes from Camden Yards and 40 minutes from the Nationals ballpark. So we will be seeing a lot of baseball, and I still love Camden Yards the most.
Do you love your ballpark down there? I mean, obviously these blimps that are put up, Luke and I are going to fly down and do the All-Star game in Miami. We made those plans earlier this week. Baseball in a dome's a little weird, and I know in certain places you have to have it, and in Tampa they get crushed on it. But down in Houston, I mean, it's going to be balls out hot this weekend. It's going to be 95 degrees every day down there, right?
Well, we've had unusually low humidity. The roof was open last night. And I love going to Minute Maid Park. I counted the other night when I was there. I decided to count the signs for endorsements between the foul poles. And I asked the guys on my talk show yesterday, I said, how many signs with advertisers do you think there are between the foul poles? One said 30 and the other said 33. And I said 76. I said, I may be the only person to ever count the signs. And I love the ads on the outfield fences. One of my most treasured books of the hundreds that I have was one given to me in 1970s called The Ballparks, in which it was a big coffee table book with pictures of every ballpark ever used in Major League Baseball.
I own that book. It's sitting in the other room. Absolutely. I could get my wife to fetch it, bring it in here, and hold it up. It had Wrigley Field. And the best part about it is the book's now about 30 years old, so it really stands as a period piece because it's got, like, Riverfront and the old Cleveland Municipal before even, any of the new ballparks were built. They're all new now, as you know.
Well, it has ballparks when the fans were the outfield. There were no fences. The fans were the fences, and they watched them play. And I love the old ballparks. When Camden Yards started that trend to put the retro field downtown again, which really began the revitalization of almost every downtown. I can think back to when I started covering the NFL and what it was like to go downtown. They were desolate, they were dangerous, and now they're all vibrant. It all started right there in Baltimore. And our ballpark here, I never get tired of going to it. I love it when the roof is open, but because of the heat and humidity this weekend, I'm sure it'll be closed. Our last good weather day, today the high is 87, but the humidity's low. So when the Orioles will get the roof closed, and it'll be very comfortable. That's good for pitchers. When Roger Clemens was pitching here at the end of his career, he always wanted the roof closed, but because that way he had more stamina. So it's always better for the pitchers. And they would have had a couple games rained out this week if it hadn't been for having the retractable roof. But I can't get enough of the old ballparks of baseball. People here, as you can imagine, Nestor, are really fired up about the Astros.
Well, tell me about the fired up part, because, I mean, you said to me when I threw you a text, because we always sit here and talk football. We've been talking football and Oilers and Texans for years and years, and you do it in two different markets. But yeah, baseball in Houston, you talk about indoors. That's all it ever was at the old Astrodome. It's all people there sort of kind of know. And, you know, I guess in the modern era, the one World Series run now over a decade ago, and some really dark times there where no one was watching. You know, the media deal was a big, part of that. I think Drayton McClain was such a fan-friendly owner. I always longed for a guy like him when we had Angelos here taking my press credential 11 years ago, John. But it feels to me when I go down to Houston like they're kind of waiting for the team to win, and I don't think that town would have any problem in really wrapping itself around that franchise.
The only time they've been to the World Series in 2005, they started 15-30. This year they started 30-15, and last year they got off to a terrible start, 7-17. They've been able to beat everybody regularly, but the Rangers. The Rangers have been their nemesis, and the Rangers played here this year, and they won one game. Astros took the series. After they host the Orioles, they go to Arlington to play the Rangers up there for the first time, and if they could win that series in the Rangers ballpark, people here would be really up and maybe start to take them for real. Problem we have here, Mister, is Rockets are a good example. The Rockets had the third best record in the NBA. Only Golden State and San Antonio had a better record, and yet the Rockets just totally blew the second round series to the Spurs, and it was embarrassing. So fans here have been conditioned that no matter how good your regular season is, you're conditioned for a collapse in the playoffs. And
I'm a Caps fan. I'm familiar with that, John.
And that's, what it's like. And the fans here have been conditioned to that since the Rockets won the championships in 95 and 96. Texans have been 12-4, go down the second round. Texans have never gotten beyond the second round. The Oilers never got beyond the second round since the Love Your Blue era. And last time a football team here got beyond the divisional round of the playoffs was the Oilers in the 79 season. Astros have been here since 62, been to one World Series, swept by the White Sox, and the Rockets were the last championship, not counting soccer or the WNBA. But fans here are very cynical and skeptical, but it does not keep them from getting excited during the regular season as they are for the young Astros team with two good pitchers up at the top. Dallas Keuchel's been on the DL. He's supposed to pitch against the Orioles Saturday night. I'll be there. He's 7-0. His ERA's in the ones. He missed one start with a pinched, I think, nerve in his neck or his shoulder. And Lance McCullers, he'll pitch, I think, Sunday.
That's Sunday, yeah.
And he is their second best pitcher. And after that, it's a crapshoot. They have not had, there's one kid, Joe Musgrove, they had high hopes for, off to a slow start. Mike Fiers giving up. The joke is he should change spelling of his name to F-I-R-E-S because he starts so many. He's given up more home runs than any pitcher in baseball. And they signed Charlie Morton, who'd gotten off to a 5-2 start with a high ERA. Now he's 5-4, and he pitches really well for about 5 innings, and then all of a sudden he loses it. So like every team, Nestor, they'll go as far as their pitching will take them, because the Orioles fans will see watching on TV. They're an exciting team with a lot of really good young players and a mixture with some veterans brought in this year. Ryan McCann, the catcher, Josh Reddick, the right fielder. Both of them have done really well. It's kind of like a salad. You don't want too much green You got to have a little more than the green, and that's the way they've done it this year.
Well, I mean, hitting the baseball is going to be the issue for them, right? I mean, and last year, Keuchel and the rest of the rotation, they got off to such a horrible start last year. I mean, I put my dollar on them last year. I was won over by their 2015, and certainly I think if you see Altuve or Correa play, you're won over by those kind of guys. But I believe they were tracking in the right direction, and then last year was really quite a telling little experiment for a young team, right?
Well, it's because of the pitching. Keuchel had won the Cy Young Award, then he got hurt, won 9 games, and then he was done for the year. And Colin McHugh, who had won 19 games in 2015 when Keuchel had won the Cy Young Award, they were a really, really impressive 1-2 punch. And then McHugh got hurt. He didn't pitch well. He's been on the DL, won't be back before the All-Star break. Really, nobody knows when at this point, and if he does come back, nobody knows how he'll pitch. So they've got some talented young arms in the minors, but none ready to be elevated. I feel really strongly that the general manager, Jeff Luna, who's done a real good job of drafting and developing players. He's got a lot of young talent in the minors, is going to finally have to make a trade for a proven veteran pitcher if this team wants to have a serious chance to go to the World Series.
You look at it with a much more discerning eye because of all these years of covering the NFL, John. By the way, John McClain here from the Houston Chronicle. Let me plug his Twitter. Let everybody know where to find him. HoustonChronicle.com. He's covered the NFL for 38 years there. It can be heard on Sports Radio 610 down in Houston and 104.5 in Nashville, where he does a little Oilers, Titans, Texans, Bermuda Triangle there. He's McClain _ NFL. John, you look at both sides as you talk about the front office and what that represents. Being a guy here who's done baseball and football, and I did baseball for a long time before the football team came in, then the baseball team threw me out. Now I look at it even more from the outside than I probably would on the inside because I have more time to devote to it. But it is fascinating how different these sports are run, from the way the commissioner deals with it to the way 162 games to the language barriers and cultural barriers that exist in both sports. But, this time of the NFL, there really is some downtime for evaluation, maybe too much for us to talk about it. So baseball, buys us something to do in June and July and August. But they're the same in that they all make a lot of money and they're after it. But, boy, they all go about their businesses very, very differently, these two sports, right?
Well, as they should, because football is a shorter season, because it's a longer off season, and you don't have minor leagues you have to worry about. I can't imagine what it's like to have to oversee an entire minor league system, and there are not nearly as many minor league teams today as there were, say, after World War II, when you had every team had you had multiple rookie A, B, double A, triple A. It was just amazing what they had to deal with, and not as many teams, no free agency, and you took whatever contract you were given, and then the advent of free agency in baseball put the game in the players' hands. The players run baseball, the owners run football. The players in baseball, thanks to Marvin Miller,
who's not in the Hall of Fame, right?
Who should be in the Hall of Fame because he had the biggest emphasis on the transition of baseball from a owners league to a players league than anybody in history. And why he's not in there, I don't know, but he should be. But and because they tried to have strikes in the NFL and the players crossed the picket line, the owners, I think. The owners are prepared in the NFL because they're all multi-billionaires. But I think they would cancel a season like baseball did if they had to. And that's not the way you want to go about it. But both games are so great. I think they can withstand anything. You can withstand concussions in the NFL. You can withstand wiping out a season in baseball, the steroid era, because at heart there's so many sports fans in the country, and both games are so great for different reasons. And I think it's been a privilege to be able to watch teams and be a fan as I have throughout since I was 6 years old and can remember Bill Mazeroski hitting a home run in the 7th inning for the Pirates to beat the Yankees, and in the only World Series in history where the loser just totally dominated when they won and then lost in 7 games.
He is John McClain. McClain on NFL is the way to find him out on Twitter and at the Houston Chronicle. All right, let's get to some NFL talk. I mean, you mentioned players and owners and the commissioner. You know, Goodell has really gone out of his way here to olive branch and work this thing backward, knowing how much the players sort of learned to loathe him, right? And those envelopes coming and the fines and what you can do and what you can't do. There was a heavy-handedness about the way everything was being handled by the commissioner's office, and still is. And, hey, they do run the league, but he's at least trying to make some sort of amends here, yes?
Yeah, he is, Nestor, and then you think, well, what's his ulterior motive? They don't pay his salary. They don't decide if he gets an extension or a raise or a pay cut. But as I think it probably is, he's looking ahead to an extension of the CBA. I think it expires in 2020. I know the owners would like to have it extended. The growth of their franchise since the lockout in 2011 has been just something nobody would have predicted. Now, every franchise is worth more than $1 billion and some multiple $1 billion. And that's why when one comes on the market, the billionaires just line up to get them. And it doesn't matter what seems to happen on or off the field. You know, it's still the most popular sport by far, still the most watched sport by far. And I don't like the new overtime rule at all. I'm all for, I like the fact that they're going to bring 2 back from injured reserve. I like the fact that they're going to let the players have some freedom after touchdowns, and some will be entertaining and some will make fools out of themselves, and some will still get penalized because there's going to be a lot of some things you can show them, okay, you cannot twerk, you cannot imitate a weapon, and now we find out you cannot dunk the ball over the goalpost, but you can have multiple player demonstrations. You can go to the ground and do a snow angel, whether there's snow or not. You can use the ball as a prop, and some players will probably spend as much, especially wide receivers, will spend as much time choreographing their dance, try to be famous like the Funky Chicken and the Electric Slide and the California Quake.
I can't believe we're discussing this right now, John.
Well, we better, because it's going to be. Can you imagine during the season when players will try to come up with names and be famous for their dances
and get 15 yards and piss off Harbaugh or O'Brien, right?
Sometime they will, but I don't mind it, but I feel bad for the officials as it is, because so much still is subjective. No taunting, nothing that slows down the game. Well, maybe they need to put a clock in the end zone specifically. It's clicking for players to finish their end zone.
The 10-second celebration rule.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Like hand a list of a little card that says these are the appropriate celebrations, or a GIF file?
We asked Bill O'Brien, the Texans coach, after OTA this week. I asked him, I said, what do you think about relaxing the rules on the celebrations, and are you going to show the players how they can't be twerking? And he says, well, I don't even know what twerking is. Somebody's going to have to explain it to me, but I understand why the league's doing it. They want the players and the fans to have fun. And so it is funny. They can bring in somebody to demonstrate what you can and can't do, or they could show videos of it to the players, what you can and can't do. And Nestor, I am against twerking. Watching a guy twerk, twerking's for cheerleaders, not for players.
Twerking is for Miley Cyrus, I think. John, Osweiler this week pops up in the news, and obviously we're always waiting for Cleveland to, awaken in our division. I mean, I don't know how long they can be this terrible, but I do see on draft day, when I see Jimmy Haslam in a little orange tie in the middle of the room, I realize, there is a chance that they'll never get better, even though I'm a believer in Hugh Jackson. But I do know enough to follow you on weekends and on Twitter, and I saw some of your more choice comments about Brock Osweiler at various points during the year last year. I think you welcomed him in a year ago, thinking he could be a solution there. If John Elway thought he was going to be a solution in Denver, he was not the solution in Houston. Tell me about Brock Osweiler in Cleveland. Is there any chance everyone comes back to eat their words and he turns into the guy that gets them to 10 wins?
He was 5-2 as a starter in 2015 in Denver, and everybody knows if he hadn't played, they wouldn't have been in position to get home field advantage and then win the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning and their great defense. And then he came here last year. He was 8-6 as a starter, but he did not have one good game from start to finish. He had a great overtime and into the fourth quarter period against Indy and early in the year, and we thought, aha, that's why they wanted him. That's why they won the bidding war with Denver to get Osweiler. And then he just never could do it, and it got to a point where if he was just mediocre, we're acting like he was good because he threw so many interceptions. He was off target on so many passes. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was he just didn't agree with anything Bill O'Brien wanted to do. They clashed immediately. You know, if you're Tom Brady, you can disagree with a coach and yell at him at times, and Brady did that with O'Brien, and then as Brady told us last year on a conference call, he just went on and on about how much he likes O'Brien, how much O'Brien helped his career. But Osweiler, they'd have these huge shouting matches, and if we heard about it, we'd write about it, broadcast about it, and we'd ask them, and they just kind of shrug their shoulders and say it's just typical, disagreements between a coach and a quarterback, but it was not. And it culminated in the last game at Tennessee when they got into it right before the third quarter in O'Brien's dressing room in Nashville, in which Osweiler was told he went in for Tom Savage, who got a concussion. He finished the half, and then he was told at the start of the halftime he would be playing in the second half. He would not be playing. That Savage was going back in, and at the last instant, the doctor said Savage was not. So O'Brien calls Osweiler in, tells him he's going in after all, and Osweiler said no. And then they got in this huge argument. People that were still left in the dressing room heard it. I wrote it, asked them about it. They both played it down as usual. And I knew they were going to get rid of him. I just thought they would take the salary cap hit, which would wipe out their cap. And a lot of people criticized Sashi Brown for taking on that $16 million guarantee. Well, he had so much room, it was worth doing it for a second-round pick. Even if it is a second-round pick in the mid-20s or lower like it was this year, it's still worth it because it was no sweat, did not damage them at all. Now, based on what I saw last year, if they are led to believe that he's going to be their starter over a young guy like Cody Kessler who's going to get better, then I think it'll backfire. They did the deal to get rid of him. They thought they could trade him to a team that might take on half of the $16 million guarantee he has, but here, everybody's just glad they got rid of him. It was not going to work. And you've seen it, Nestor, in every sport. A team will make a mistake, but they won't admit it. They'll keep a guy around. They'll force him to play. And then later they'll get rid of him. So the Texans screwed up getting him, but they got a lot of praise for getting rid of him and saving that $16 million on his cap.
What's going on down there in Texans land? I know you're all nose to. First things first, David Quessenberry, who has become a friend of mine, made it back out onto the field, and he was battling lymphoma the same time my wife was battling leukemia the first time. It's now 3 years later, and he might make it onto the field here, right?
David was a promising offensive lineman who was impressive as a rookie, and then he got hurt and went on injured reserve. And then the coaches liked him. They liked he had a nasty streak. And he came back the next year for Bill O'Brien, and in the OTA he started getting sick. So they sent him over to the Houston Medical Center, which is 5 minutes from the facility, and he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he began a 3-year ordeal, and he was there most of the time. And like Bill O'Brien said, he'd be in a meeting with a team, and all of a sudden he'd look out there, and there's Quessenberry taking notes. He lost a lot of weight, lost his hair, gained back his strength and his weight, got his hair back, and he was always an inspiration. But Nestor, it would be an unbelievable story if he could make the team. Not start, just make the team, because he's been 3 years in, really almost 4 seasons inactive because he was on injured reserve as a rookie. So he's a long shot. But based on what he's overcome, nobody is putting it past him. He's working his tail off. He looks good. He studies. He knows what they want to accomplish. And a good thing for him is their offensive line is very mediocre. They need a right tackle. Dwayne Brown, their left tackle, is unhappy with his contract. We may not see him till the first regular season game. They need depth. David can play guard or tackle. So if he's got to be with a team to make it as a backup, this is a great one for him to be where he is.
Happy with the Watson pick, John?
Well, so far it's so early. I thought I had him going to the Jets with the 6th pick, the first quarterback take, and I know Mike Mayock, who I really respect, had him as the number 1 quarterback. Others had Mitch Trubisky. I know the Texans like Watson and like Mahomes. They're totally different. You know, they believed that they had to get ahead of Arizona at 13 if they wanted a quarterback, and they gave up their number 1 next year to swap number 1 picks and to take Watson. People here celebrated. And the reason, Nestor, is this. You know, the Ravens got Flacco in a deal that they made with the Texans to put him in position to get Joe. And the Texans' best quarterback they've ever had is Matt Schaub. And Matt had about 3 years where he was really good, threw for more than 4,000 yards. They had winning records, and they won 2 divisions. And then his last year, he just totally melted down. And they have not had another quarterback that they could count on. And then with Bill O'Brien, in Bill O'Brien's first 3 years, they finished 9-7 each year. They've won the last 2 divisions. They won 1 playoff game last year. And he has a new quarterback every year. He has benched each of his starting quarterbacks in his first 3 seasons. Now, Watson's not going to play anytime soon because they like Tom Savage. Savage would have started the playoffs. He would have been their quarterback at the end of last season if he'd been healthy. He's played very little, Nestor, and he's been hurt every year. But it's the last year of his contract. Here's a guy with a chance to make a lot of money to play here next year or to play somewhere else. I think Watson, and if you think about this, Watson's got to learn how to not just take a snap under center. He's got to learn how to huddle. He's never been in a huddle. He's got to learn a playbook. Never had a playbook. He's got to learn to call plays. He never called plays in a huddle. Those are things that'll come to him. Warren Moon, I did a column with Moon after he was drafted, and Warren said the first thing you'll have to learn is footwork. It's going to change. And once he gets the footwork down where it's instinctive and not thinking about it, he will be so much more comfortable. His accuracy will improve. And he said because he's smart, he's a winner, he's a great athlete, even though his skill set is so opposite of Savage. Savage is a pure pocket passer with a great arm, but is really slow. And he's going to stay in the pocket. And he knows O'Brien's system inside and out. He can handle O'Brien's tough love coaching. As Savage told us 2 weeks ago, the quarterback room will be, quote unquote, peaceful. In other words, with Osweiler, it was not peaceful.
We also had Ryan Mallett there before that. You had that whole scene, right?
Oh, they've had 10 quarterbacks and 8 starters in O'Brien's first 3 years. So everybody celebrated the Watson pick because they saw him just totally obliterate Alabama in the last 2 NCAA championship games, and they knew enough about him to know what a good kid he is. And he reminds me, his personality, of Warren Moon so much. And even though Warren came here after 5 years in Canada, he was mature when he got here, even though he lost for 3 years. But Watson has a similar personality, and Moon's kind of become a mentor to him, and Moon has told him this is a perfect city, great situation for him. He doesn't have to play right away. He can watch and learn. And fans here and it's funny, Nestor, nationally I see him as the leading candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year on some websites, and I'm thinking, how's that going to be when he's not going to play? I go Leonard Fournette. And so Savage has paid his dues. He's respected by the players and coaches. he'll play unless he's bad or unless he gets hurt. And if it's early in the season, Brandon Whedon will be playing. They're not going to play Watson until he's ready. And fans here are going, well, look at Dak Prescott, look at Russell Wilson. Both those guys took over teams that had losing records the year before. This team's had a winning record. It's trying to win a division that's gotten better. And you don't see rookie quarterbacks starting for teams in that situation entering the season. Maybe Watson will end up like Wilson. He'll pick everything up so fast, he'll blow everybody out of the water in preseason, and they'll start him. But right now, Tom Savage is a starter, and Watson will watch and learn.
He is a man who is paying his hard-earned American money to watch Wade Miley labor in Houston on Saturday night against Dallas Keuchel. John McClain covers all things NFL and the Houston Texans. He is a great follow on Twitter at McClain_on_NFL, as well as at the Houston Chronicle, also doing radio down in Houston and in Nashville. By the way, nice little party you put on at the Super Bowl this year. That comeback was a little tricky at the end, but I always love me a Super Bowl in Houston. Good town for that, man.
Hey, I'm glad you had a good time. Hope you have a great trip to Dallas and Denver, and I'll see you at some point.
I hope to see you further on down the road, maybe a baseball game, a beer, a hot dog, a crab cake, who knows. He is John McClain, McClain_on_NFL. No one does it better. 38 years and counting, and still nobody does it better than he does it down at the Houston Chronicle. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault all weekend long while you're watching the Orioles and the Astros from Minute Maid Park. I am a very available individual as well, out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNST TV channel. It is my wife's birthday weekend. It is also Memorial Day weekend. We're going to be doing some traveling this weekend. You can keep up with us out there. Meanwhile, the morning newspaper ships to your email inbox digitally each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it is still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last, but never ever least, breaking news happens first right here on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis is here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5 and getting you ready for the weekend and for summertime and the holiday and all that good stuff. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.